Hi everyone, I'm Maria McLachlan and I decided to have a go at making a few videos responding to someone else's video, which isn't something I've ever done before. The video I'm responding to is one of a great many on YouTube attacking J.K. Rowling. It's very long, which is why I thought I'd make a few short videos in response to some of the things in it that have annoyed the crap out of me. It's on a channel called Jammidodger, which currently has nearly 600,000 subscribers. So a few more than I do, but I'm sure I'll catch up if I live another century or two. The video features Jamie Rains, who is transgender, and Shaba Lotan, who is Jamie's partner, and in it they explain why the piece that J.K. Rowling wrote on her website back in June of this year, 2020, is anti-trans, though actually the first part of their video, the introduction, which I deal with now, doesn't say much about the content of JK's essay. It comes across a bit like a lesson in transgender ideology for beginners, so it is very much in keeping with the theme of other videos that I've made this year about awful arguments by trans activists, which I will be continuing, by the way. But I fancy doing something else for a change, so let's jump in.
Before we start this video, we want to clearly state three things. 1. Biological sex is definitely real. 2. Women's rights and girls' rights definitely need to be protected and fought for, of course. And 3. J.K. Rowling is perfectly entitled to like, support and write whatever she wants. Freedom of speech should be protected.
Trans people and allies don't think otherwise. They agree.
Apart from the ones that have been targeting her with some of the most horrendous abuse I have seen online, which I've decided not to show in this video because I don't want it to get hit with an age restriction, which is what happened last time I posted screenshots of the kind of vile comments that trans activists fling at women every single day. Now, to be fair, Jamie and Shaba do condemn this abuse later on in their video, and they don't really do themselves any favours, so I'll probably say more about that in a future video. Apart from all the online abusers, there are the ones reporting her to Twitter, the ones trying to get her prosecuted, and the ones who are burning her books or claiming to. But apart from them, trans people and allies think she's free to write what she likes, do they? Cool.
At the same time, J.K. Rowling's essay is misleading and damaging to the trans community.
I think the term trans community is misleading. This shouldn't need saying, but trans people aren't a homogenous group any more than gender critical people are. Some of them hate each other and don't commune at all. Same with us. Only some trans people are upset about that essay. Plenty of others have said publicly that they have no problem with it at all.
Because honestly, I can see why what she writes looks really reasonable to some people.
The reason her essay looks really reasonable is because it is. She shows empathy for people with gender dysphoria. She says that for some people with gender dysphoria, transition is the only solution. But she also stresses why she thinks biological sex is important and asks that women's voices be heard and understood without her being targeted with threats and abuse.
My name is Shaba and I am a cisgender woman. Cisgender is merely an adjective used to describe someone who is not transgender to save time.
Saving time isn't the reason you say cisgender women rather than just women. Let's be honest. Cisgender is a term used by trans ideologues to try to reinforce the idea that there are different kinds of women, when in fact there is only one kind. Woman is our word. It's not for you to give away to people who don't fit the only coherent definition. As the wonderful Alison Moyet said recently, if words are important to you, it should be no surprise that they are important to other people. Woman is a word we are not giving up.
So instead of saying transgender women and non-transgender women, you can say trans women and cis women.
Or we can say women and trans-identifying men. It's important to be truthful when fighting against the erasure of women as a sex class that Jamie and Shaba are promoting.
Both of these terms fall under the umbrella of woman, but lots of people think, why are you labelling me as cis? I don't want that label. I didn't agree to be called cis. You're still a woman, see? Still under the umbrella.
I'm still a woman, am I? Well, thank you so much. You're too kind. But that umbrella doesn't actually exist outside of the imagination of some trans people and allies.
It's just an extra adjective for you.
I'm good, thanks. Don't need any more adjectives. Just call me a woman. Call me an angry old woman if you like. That works.
In the same way that I'm an adult woman, or a brown woman, or an English woman.
Right, let's have a closer look at these. Adult woman. Surely we can agree that this is pleonastic. The word adult is superfluous here. I mean, there's no such thing as a baby woman, so let's dispense with the word adult. And as this is the woman umbrella, we can also dispense with the word woman from underneath it. Cis woman is only used by people who've drunk the gender Kool-Aid, and it basically just means woman, so we'll get rid of that. In fact, to be absolutely clear, why don't we explain what a woman is? We'll use the primary definition, the one that's coherent, globally understood and agreed on, shall we? So we're left with English woman, meaning adult human female from England, brown woman, meaning adult human female with a brown skin, and trans woman, meaning adult human female who is male. Some mistake here, surely. A form of category mistake, to be precise. A category mistake is a logical fallacy. It occurs when something that belongs in one category is presented as if it belongs in another, different one. But not to worry, we can get round this problem just as soon as Shaba or Jamie comes up with a definition of woman that they think is more accurate and which is also rational, useful and non-circular, so everyone can be clear about what a woman is. Or we can stop pretending there's a woman umbrella and simply accept that woman is the word for what about half the population will grow up to be, assuming they survive childhood. The rest will grow up to be men. Of course, this says nothing about how we feel about our sex and about the cultural expectations placed on us about how we're supposed to look and behave. In the ideal world we should be striving for, people would be free to challenge those expectations and confound traditional ideas of behavior and appearance without pretending to be the other sex.
It's not something to take offence at, and it's not something that is actually to do with us as cis women.
Actually, reducing women to a subcategory of what we are is something to take offence at. And how can you possibly say that sticking a qualifier in front of the word woman to refer to us isn't actually to do with us as women?
It's so that we can expand the umbrella to also accommodate trans women.
Also known as men, and as such wouldn't belong under the woman umbrella even if it existed, which it doesn't.
We've decided to do this together to give two perspectives.
One, as a trans person who is the focus of exclusion by gender critical theory.
And one who, like most gender critical people, is a cis woman, me, and who also wants women's rights, including cisgender women's rights, to be protected.
Including cisgender women's rights. Well, thank you for including women amongst those whose women's rights you want to protect.
My opinion on J.K. Rowling's piece is that it's misinformed and made up of half-truths from unspecified sources.
This isn't to say that J.K. Rowling has done this intentionally or maliciously. We can't comment on her intentions. But what we can comment on is the danger of sharing these thoughts on a really large platform without citing any sources and without sharing the full picture.
My opinion is that these claims from Jamie and Shaba aren't justified and that they fail to prove them in their video, that what they provide instead is a lot of disingenuity, a heavy dose of gender ideology, complete with easily spotted flaws, half-truths and some outright falsehoods. I'm not saying they've done this intentionally or maliciously. I'm sure they're just mistakes, but some of them are really quite indefensible. I would also say that they bang on about the lack of citations in JK's piece, but it wasn't written as an academic essay, and there was no need to provide a list of sources. It was written as an explanation of why she thinks and feels as she does. What she gives is her full picture, which she should share because as a much loved and admired public figure, many of us want to know. We shouldn't be protected from other people's opinions just because they might upset us. Now, obviously, Jamie and Shaba see things differently. They have a different picture, which they should be just as free to share, however upsetting or even dangerous they appear to others.
The gender critical perspective that believes that gender identity does not exist, only biological sex. And on this basis, trans women are not women, they're men, because women only have XX chromosomes based on biological sex.
It's not about chromosomes, it's about gametes and the developmental pathway each of us follows towards the production of said gametes. That is the basis on which we are categorized as male or female. Now, if you are suggesting that this thing you call gender identity trumps biological reality, the onus is on you to make a case for it. You can start by explaining exactly what you mean by gender, please, because the word is used in different ways by different people.
I want to make it very clear that gender identity and biological sex are two very separate things.
Got it. And you'll be explaining what you mean by gender, we hope.
Biological sex is what you're physically born as, and it's what the doctor assigns you as when you are born at birth, right?
If it's what we're born as, then it's not assigned. It is what it is, and what it is observed and recorded, not assigned.
There's intersex people too, of course, but trans exclusionists.
Note the term trans exclusionist, which is used throughout their video. Ostensibly, they use it to mean those of us who exclude men who claim to be women from the category of people known as women, and vice versa for men. The term has the advantage from Jamie and Shubba's perspective that it has a negative connotation. It evokes nastiness and discrimination, whereas inclusionist sounds positive, warm and welcoming. Of course we should include everyone who identifies as a woman. Including the likes of convicted rapist Karen White. We should send her to the female estate where she can sexually assault vulnerable and traumatized women prisoners. Lovely.
There's intersex people too, of course, but trans exclusionists argue that there are a majority of traits that each of these people have that can still assign them into the male or female bucket.
Okay, people with so-called intersex conditions have nothing to do with being transgender, and many people with differences of sexual development are fed up with seeing gender ideologues use their conditions in furtherance of the trans agenda. Just saying.
Now here's the kicker that trans exclusionists don't mention. Trans people agree that biological sex exists. They don't dispute this.
That's not a kicker. Some trans people do dispute it.
There are a teeny, tiny few.
Like Nicholas Matt, lecturer in gender studies at Toronto University.
It's not correct that there is such a thing as biological sex.
ActionAid UK. You might want to pause the video to read their incredible statement. Chase Strangio, who is transgender and a staff attorney at the American Civil Liberties Union, and who seems keen to be remembered as a bit of a plonker. George Takei, Star Trek actor with over 3 million followers on Twitter. George thinks you sound scientifically ignorant and elevate transphobia. Trans influencer and YouTuber Riley Dennis, etc., etc., etc.
We say biological sex is a real thing. Oh my god, Dad, of course biological sex is a real thing. Can you believe that trans people think that biological sex is not a real thing?
Well, yes.
Hang on, we never said that. We know biological sex is a real thing, but we're just saying that gender identity is also a real thing.
Annoying, aren't they? Never mind. Hopefully they'll explain exactly what they mean by gender, as it seems to be pretty fundamental to their argument.
Well, biological sex is a real thing.
Yes, and so is gender identity.
Define gender.
But biological sex is a real thing. Trans inclusionists know that biological sex exists. They just also know that gender identity exists as well.
And what is gender?
For most people in the world, like me, you know you're a woman, like I do up here.
Hold on, the reason I know I'm a woman up here is that down here is a female body that has functioned as only a female body can. In the circumstances, it would be difficult not to know that I'm a woman.
Trans men are men. Their assigned biological sex is female, but their gender identity is man.
And what do you mean by gender?
Trans women are women. Their assigned biological sex is male, but their gender identity is woman.
Define gender.
And non-binary people are non-binary. Their assigned biological sex could be male or female, but their gender identity doesn't match.
Ce gender, c'est quoi alors? Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire exactement?
Shaba,
Yeah.
if your body suddenly disappeared and you were just a floating head, would you still be a woman?
Yeah.
Right, is that in case anyone thought that cutting off their head would change their sex?
This is gender identity.
Define gender.
Forgetting your internal plumbing, it's what you know you are up here.
How do you know? Is it like how an anorexic teenager just knows she's horribly overweight? Is it like how some people just know there's a God? Is it like how we're just supposed to know what you mean by the word gender without any explanation from you?
So why is this important? Some people say J.K. Rowling doesn't even put down gender identity. She's clearly defending the fact that biological sex is real. What's transphobic about that? The reason this is transphobic is not only because of what she's said, it's because of who becomes excluded because of what she's said.
So by saying that biological sex exists, and by not following that up with gender identity also exists,
She's transphobic because, in spite of showing empathy and support for trans people, she didn't mention this thing you call gender identity, which you as a trans person and a trans ally insist is real, mention repeatedly, but fail to define. Right.
what you're doing is saying that anyone who is assigned biologically female deserves women's rights. That means cis women and trans men. But look at that. Trans women are left out of this bucket because their assigned sex is male, and that's not right because trans women need women's rights too.
Why do they need women's rights when they're male? All the legal rights that women fought for and won over the last century or so, they have anyway. They have the right to vote, to open a bank account, to take out a mortgage in their own name. They have the right to equal pay and not to be discriminated against at work. And it's not as if they're going to need contraception or an abortion or maternity leave, is it? If you want to make a case that they need to access women's sports in spite of their physical advantage, women's refuges, prisons, sex-specific occupations like rape counselling, places on the Labour Party's all women shortlists, then bring it. Bring your argument.
So women's rights activism has to also believe that gender identity is real.
So define gender.
Also, trans men don't need women's rights because we're not women.
Are you sure?
We are men. We need trans rights, but not women's rights.
So Women who identify as men need trans rights, but not women's rights, not even maternity leave, even though some can and do choose to get pregnant and give birth. But men who identify as women need women's rights? Like what exactly?
If you now say, yeah, well, J.K. Rowling says she supports trans women, and her saying that biological sex is real doesn't necessarily mean that gender identity isn't real, right?
Define gender. Oh, forget it.
If J.K. Rowling really meant to say that gender identity is real but just forgot to mention that, I am so positive there would have been a follow-up to say, hey, my bad, gender identity is a thing, trans women are...
Right, let's cut the crap. Firstly, we can take it as a given that J.K. Rowling didn't forget to mention gender identity. Her essay was about how and why she became interested in the debate around transgenderism, and those reasons are down to sex, which is the basis on which women are oppressed under patriarchy. It was also about why the harassment and abuse of her started and continues to this day. And let's be honest, trans activists don't come out of it looking great. Secondly, gender identity is a thing insofar as everything is a thing. An idea is a thing. A feeling is a thing. A delusion is a thing. Even bollocks is a thing. The problem I'm having with Jamie and Shaba is that they don't explain the precise nature of this thing they call gender. They give no examples of why they are both sure that Jamie is a man and Shaba isn't. As I said already, different people use the word to mean different things. The World Health Organization describes gender in terms of socially constructed characteristics, behaviors, and roles associated with being a man or a woman, which can vary from society to society and change over time. If we accept this definition, we are talking about stereotypes of masculinity and femininity, which aren't necessarily innate or permanent, and that tends to be how gender critics think about it. Thirdly, even if you are a man who feels more affinity with what is culturally considered feminine or vice versa, that doesn't mean that men who call themselves trans women are women or vice versa. Women across cultures aren't exploited and oppressed because of their gender identity, but because of their sex. That is why it's important. They can't identify out of it. The last thing I want to say in this video is that Jamie and Shaba don't help themselves by asserting what are demonstrable falsehoods about J.K. Rowling's essay. For example,
she didn't do that. What she did instead was write a whole long essay reinforcing that sex is real, disregarding gender identity, misgendering trans women multiple times.
false. Misgendering means when one refers to a trans person by their sex or by the pronoun that relates to their sex rather than using their preferred pronoun. Now, JK refers to only one trans person whom she calls a transsexual woman and about whom she uses the feminine pronoun. In other words, JK respects this person's gender identity. To claim that she repeatedly misgenders people is simply untrue. She doesn't even do it once. So why say that she does? This was the point that the video lost any credibility for me. Although I obviously wasn't going to agree with Jamie and Shaba anyway, their demeanour and certain things they had said led me to assume that anything they said about the content of JK's essay would be truthful and accurate. Discovering that confidence to have been misplaced made it seem all the more important that I watch and respond to the rest of their video, although there's too much to go through line by line. I'll expose some more of the untruths in it in part 2. Thanks for watching. Bye.